I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even drop the phone. I just stood there, frozen. Because when my daughter-in-law, Lena, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people," something inside me quietly shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly, like glass cracking under pressure. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. I blinked once, twice. I waited for her to laugh, to say it was a joke, to say, "I'm kidding, Renate, of course you're invited." But she didn't, she just smiled. That calm, polite smile she always used when she knew she was holding the power. The kind of smile that says, "I already won and you're too slow to realize it." The phone was still in my hand. I had picked it up to call my son Max, my only child, to ask him a simple question. "So, when's the wedding?" That was it. Nothing dramatic, nothing nosy, just a mother wanting to be there for the biggest day of her son's life. Instead, I got four words that hit harder than any slap ever could: only special people. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and pulled hard. Slowly, I turned my head toward Max. He was standing near the window, hands in his pockets, eyes glued to the floor. He wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't last-minute chaos. This was planned, carefully, quietly, without me. Lena, meanwhile, made herself comfortable on the sofa, my sofa. The one I had bought for them 2 years earlier when they said their old couch hurt their backs. I remembered standing in the furniture store, hesitating over the price tag. $1,200, too much for me. But Lena had smiled and said, "It's an investment, Renate. We'll be sitting on this for years." So I paid, because that's what I always did. I paid. Lena crossed her legs and leaned back, completely relaxed, like she hadn't just erased me from my own son's wedding. I finally found my voice. "Yesterday," I asked quietly. "You got married yesterday?" Max swallowed hard. "Yeah, Mom," he said. "It was intimate, just us and the witnesses." Witnesses, I almost laughed. Because I had already seen the photos. They were all over social media. Lena's parents stood proudly beside them, champagne glasses raised, her sisters laughing, her cousins dancing, her friends posing in elegant dresses. I saw the smiles. The decorations, the white dress I had helped pay for, $800 just last month. She had told me it was for personal expenses. I didn't ask questions. I never did. I trusted. I stood there in my own living room, holding my phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds, realizing I was the only one who hadn't been considered special. The pale pink dress I had bought for the wedding flashed through my mind. Still hanging in my closet, tag still on, $200. I remembered standing in front of the mirror, turning side to side, thinking, this will look nice in the photos. Photos I would never appear in. I had even bought new shoes. Comfortable ones, because I wanted to last the whole ceremony. For weeks, I had planned everything. I had set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift, cash in an envelope. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago. "I'm going to be a wedding mom," I told her, my voice full of pride. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might stop by after the ceremony. Maybe have cake, maybe toast together. All of that collapsed into one sentence: only special people. I slowly sat down, not because I wanted to, but because my legs stopped working. Lena finally spoke again, her tone soft, almost sweet. "Renate, please don't make this a big deal. Weddings are stressful. We just wanted something small." Small, her parents were there, her siblings were there, her friends were there, but I wasn't. Max finally looked up. "Mom, you understand, right?" I looked at my son, the boy I raised alone after his father died, the boy I stayed up with during fevers, the boy whose college books I paid for by skipping vacations and wearing the same coat for 10 winters. I wanted to scream, instead I nodded. "Of course," I said, "because that's what I always did." I swallowed my pain and made it easier for them. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I didn't cry yet. I just stared at the wall, because crying would mean admitting what I already knew, that I had slowly become invisible in my own family. For 3 years, I had been their safety net, their backup plan, their emergency fund, their personal ATM. I paid their rent $500 every single month for 3 years. That alone was $18,000. When their fridge was empty, I filled it. When Lena's car needed repairs, I paid. When they wanted a new air conditioner, I covered it. Furniture, groceries, gifts, medical bills. Whenever they said, "We're struggling," I showed up. I told myself that was love. I told myself that was what good mothers did. But standing there, excluded from my own son's wedding, I finally saw the truth. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. Reliable, quiet, disposable. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me. Her voice was completely different. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the smug calm. Now she sounded shaky, almost scared. Renate, the rent is overdue, she said. The landlord is pressuring us. If we don't pay this week, he says he'll kick us out. I didn't speak, I just listened. You forgot to make the transfer, she added, like it was an accident. Like it was my responsibility. I remembered every rushed trip to the bank, every time I skipped my own needs to cover theirs, every cheap meal I ate so they could live comfortably. And after all that, I wasn't special enough to attend their wedding. I took a slow breath. Lena, I said calmly, surprising even myself, didn't I warn you that I only help special people? Silence, thick, heavy. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was shaking, it was her. Renate, I don't understand, she stammered. We're always special to you. You're like a second mom to me. I almost laughed that line. She only used it when she needed something. That night, I finally did the math. Over $33,000. Gone, not invested, not appreciated, just consumed. And for what? To be excluded, dismissed, used. That night, I cried. Not soft tears, angry ones. I cried for the woman I had become, silent, obedient, desperate for scraps of affection. I cried for every time I ignored my instincts. And when I woke up the next morning, something had changed. Not sadness, not fear, clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't wait for an apology that would never come. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my bank statements. Because if they thought I was going to keep paying quietly, they had no idea what was coming next. I sat at the kitchen table longer than usual that morning. The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't move. For years, this table had been command central for everyone else's life. Bills spread out, receipts stacked. Notes reminding me what Max and Lena needed next. Rent transfer, groceries, car payment, emergency. There was always an emergency, but that morning something felt different. For the first time, I wasn't calculating how to stretch my money for them. I was calculating how much of myself I had given away. I pulled out my bank statements, not the highlights, not the "it's probably fine" version. The full truth, month by month, year by year, $500 for rent every month for 3 years. I circled the total in red, then groceries, sometimes $150, sometimes $250. Always paid by me, then the extras, just this once. Last time, I promise. We'll pay you back. They never did. When I finally added it all up, my hand froze over the calculator. $33,400. That was the exact price of my invisibility. $33,000 to not be special. $33,000 to not get an invitation. I pushed the papers away and stood up. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. This felt colder, clearer. I grabbed my purse and my keys. I knew exactly where I was going. The bank smelled the same as always: polished floors, recycled air, quiet tension. Mr. Klein, the branch manager, spotted me immediately. He always did. For 3 years, I had been one of his most predictable customers. Same transfers, same accounts, same amounts. He waved me into his office. Mrs. Richter, he said warmly, everything okay? I closed the door behind me and sat down. No, I said, but it will be. He blinked, surprised. I need to cancel all automatic transfers, I continued. All of them. Immediately, his eyebrows lifted. All of them, the monthly ones to your son? Yes, he hesitated. Are you sure? These have been running for years. That's the problem, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to his computer. As he worked, I felt my phone vibrating inside my purse. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. After a moment, Mr. Klein looked back at me. Mrs. Richter, forgive me for asking, but are you being pressured? The question caught me off guard. A stranger, yet somehow more concerned than my own child. No, I said, I'm finally stopping the pressure from myself. He smiled gently. I see that a lot, he said. People confuse generosity with obligation. I watched him click cancel, one by one. Each cancellation felt like a small weight lifting off my chest. And I want to restrict access, I added. No one else gets information about my accounts, no exceptions. Done. He slid the paperwork toward me. As I signed, my phone buzzed again, then again, then again. Mr. Klein glanced at it. Family? Yes, I said. For now, when I walked out of the bank, the air felt different. Lighter, like I could finally breathe. The calls didn't stop. Max, Lena, unknown numbers. I didn't answer any of them. I turned my phone off completely. For the first time in years, silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. I went for a walk, not to the grocery store, not to the pharmacy, just a walk. I passed the park where I used to take Max when he was little. He used to run ahead, then turn around to make sure I was still watching. Mom, look. Back then, he wanted my attention. Now he only wanted my money. I sat on a bench and let the truth sink in. I hadn't lost my son overnight. I had lost him slowly, one transfer at a time. When I got home, something felt wrong. There were cars in my driveway, not one, three. My heart dropped. I recognized Max's car, Lena's too. And a third one unfamiliar. They had keys. I had given them keys years ago because I trusted them, because I thought family meant safety. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. This wasn't fear. This was resolve. I opened the door. They were already inside, in my house. Max sat on the sofa, head in his hands. Lena paced like a caged animal, and a man in a gray suit sat at my dining table. My papers spread out in front of him. "What is going on?" I asked. They all turned toward me like I was the intruder. Lena rushed over. "Renate, thank God you're here," she said. "We need to talk." The man stood and extended his hand. "Mrs. Richter," he said smoothly. "I'm Mr. Fisher, a family law attorney." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked straight to the table and gathered my documents. "These are private," I said. "You had no permission to look at them." Max stood up. "Mom, please." "We're worried about you." Worried, that word again. "What about?" I asked. Mr. Fisher adjusted his tie. "Your recent behavior, cutting off financial support, ignoring calls. Installing boundaries suddenly." "Boundaries are not symptoms," I replied. "They're decisions." Lena stepped closer, her voice soft. "Renate, honey, at your age, confusion can happen, stress, loneliness." There it was, the angle. "She thinks I'm confused," I said calmly. "Is that right?" Mr. Fisher nodded. "Your children are concerned about your mental well-being." Concerned, the same people who excluded me from their wedding. The same people who only called when rent was due. Concerned, something hard settled in my chest. "I am not confused," I said firmly. "I am clear, and all of you need to leave, now." Max's face tightened. "You can't just do this, Mom," he snapped. "We made plans based on your support." "Plans based on my money," I corrected, "not on my presence." Mr. Fisher placed a folder on the table. "We prepared a temporary power of attorney. This would help manage things until you stabilize." I picked it up, didn't open it, dropped it straight into the trash. Lena gasped. "You can't throw that away." "I just did." Max raised his voice. "This is going to end badly for you." I looked at my son, really looked, and for the first time I didn't see my child. I saw a man who felt entitled to my life. "I'm already alone," I said quietly. "The difference is now it's by choice." I pointed to the door. "Get out." They hesitated. Then one by one they left, the lawyer first, then Lena glaring, then Max. Before closing the door, he turned back. "You'll regret this." I closed the door gently, locked it, and leaned against it. The house was silent, peacefully silent. That night I didn't cry. I slept deeply because the money had stopped. And so had the abuse. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I locked the door, leaned my back against it, and let the silence settle over the house like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No transfers. No emergencies, no guilt, just peace. That peace lasted exactly 3 days. On the fourth morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later, it rang again. Then a voicemail notification appeared. I listened. "Mrs. Richter, this is the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report requesting a wellness check. Please contact us as soon as possible." My stomach dropped. A wellness check. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Max and Lena hadn't backed off. They had escalated. An hour later, there was a knock at my door, firm, official. I opened it to find a woman in her early 40s wearing a badge and holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Renate Richter?" "Yes, I'm Susan Miller with Social Services. We received a concern about your safety and mental well-being." Concern, always that word. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. Refusing would only make things worse. She looked around my living room carefully. Clean floors, organized shelves, fresh flowers on the table. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yes. And your family?" "My son and daughter-in-law live nearby." She nodded and made a note. "We were informed you recently stopped providing financial support and cut off communication." I did, and may I ask why? I met her eyes. "Because I realized they were using me." She paused. "Some family members described this change as sudden." I smiled faintly. "It wasn't sudden," I said. "It was overdue." She asked questions for nearly an hour. What day was it? Who was the president? Did I manage my own bills? Did I cook for myself? I answered calmly, clearly. When she finally closed her folder, her expression softened. "Mrs. Richter, I see no signs of cognitive impairment." Relief washed through me. "But," she added, "family conflicts like this can escalate. I strongly recommend legal counsel." That word stayed with me, legal, because Max and Lena were already thinking that way. 2 days later, the next blow arrived. A certified letter from a law firm. I didn't need to open it to understand. Inside was a formal notice, petition for guardianship evaluation. They were trying to declare me mentally incompetent. My hands shook, not from fear. From rage, my own son, the boy I raised alone after his father died, the boy I skipped meals for, the boy I protected my entire life. He was trying to take control of my mind, my money, my freedom. I didn't cry. I picked up the phone, and for the first time since this began, I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. Weber, recommended by my sister Diana. He specialized in elder rights. When I told him everything, the money, the wedding, the lawyer ambush, the social services visit, he went quiet. Then he said something that reframed everything. Mrs. Richter, what you're describing is elder financial abuse. The word hit me hard. Abuse, I thought abuse meant yelling or hitting. It often looks quieter, he said, especially when money is involved. He explained it calmly, how common this was, how adult children slowly drain their parents. And how, when the money stops, control becomes the goal. Your son isn't worried about your mental health, he said. He's worried about losing access to your bank account. We made a plan, immediately, change the locks, install cameras. Move accounts, document everything, and most importantly, fight back. That evening, as the locksmith worked on my door, I watched from the window. I didn't feel weak, I felt steady. I wasn't protecting money anymore. I was protecting myself. When the final lock clicked into place, the locksmith smiled. You're safe now, ma'am. For the first time in years, I believed it. That night, I sat alone in my living room. No calls, no demands. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed love had to be earned through checks and transfers. That woman was gone. Because if they wanted to prove I was losing my mind, they were about to learn just how sharp it still was. The word guardianship sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. I must have read the letter 10 times. Same words, same threat, petition to determine mental incapacity. They weren't just angry, they weren't just panicking. They were trying to erase me. Legally, I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop working. Every memory replayed differently now. Every "Are you okay, Mom?" Every "We're just worried about you." Every fake smile. It had all been groundwork. They didn't love me, they managed me, and the moment I stopped being profitable, they tried to delete me. By morning, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was focused. Mr. Weber arrived at 8:30 am sharp. He didn't bring coffee, he brought files. First thing, he said, setting them on the table, we document everything. We went line by line. 3 years of bank statements, rent payments, emergency transfers, furniture receipts. He underlined numbers with a red pen. $33,400, he said quietly. That's not support. That's dependency. He looked up at me, and dependency turns ugly when it gets cut off. I nodded. I never thought my own son would try to put me under legal control. Most parents don't, he said calmly. That's why it works. That afternoon, Max tried a new approach. He didn't call, he showed up. The cameras caught him pacing on my porch. No Lena this time, just him, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. I watched from my phone. I didn't open the door. He knocked, once, twice, then he spoke through the wood. Mom, please, we need to talk. Silence. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Still silence. I know Lena said some things she shouldn't have. I laughed softly, out loud, not today. After 5 minutes he left, and I felt something I hadn't expected, relief. The next day the legal bomb dropped. Mr. Weber called. They filed the full petition. My stomach tightened. When's the hearing? 3 weeks, 3 weeks, to decide whether I controlled my life or whether my son would. They listed witnesses, he continued. Your daughter-in-law, a neighbor, and a medical professional. I closed my eyes. They're lying. I know, he said evenly, and we're ready. That night I sat alone and finally let myself grieve. Not the money, not the house. My son, the boy I used to carry on my hip. The man who now wanted a judge to sign me away like damaged property. I whispered to the empty room, how did we get here? The answer hurt. I let it. Then I stood up, pulled my shoulders back, and said something I hadn't said in years. Enough. 3 weeks sounds like a long time. It isn't. Not when every day feels like someone else is quietly rewriting your life behind your back. I woke up each morning wondering which version of me Max and Lena were presenting to the world. The confused mother, the unstable widow, the paranoid old woman who didn't know what she was doing. The strange thing was, I had never felt clearer. Mr. Weber called me 2 days after the petition was filed. I got the witness list, he said. You're not going to like it. Tell me anyway, he sighed. Lena, obviously, a neighbor named Mark Davis, and a pharmacist, Daniel Green. I frowned. My pharmacist. Daniel's been filling my vitamins for years. He barely knows me. That's exactly why they chose him, Mr. Weber replied. Neutral professionals sound credible to judges. Something twisted in my chest. They weren't just lying anymore. They were recruiting. We started with Mr. Davis. I knew exactly who he was. the man across the street who complained if anyone parked near his mailbox. The man who once yelled at my friends for talking too loud at 7 in the evening. Mr. Weber and I knocked on his door together. He opened it with a scowl. "What do you want, Mr. Davis?" Mr. Weber said calmly. "I represent Mrs. Richter. We understand you've provided a statement regarding her mental state." His eyes flicked toward me. "Well, yes, someone had to." I crossed my arms. "Based on what exactly?" He shrugged. "You installed cameras. You stopped talking to your family. You had police outside your house." "So," I said slowly, "protecting myself makes me crazy." He snorted. "Normal people don't act like that." Mr. Weber stepped in. "Mr. Davis, did you ever speak directly with my client about these concerns?" "No." "Did you ever ask why the cameras were installed?" "No." "So your statement is based on assumptions." He leaned back. "I know crazy when I see it." I smiled sadly. And that's when I understood something important. Some people don't need facts, they just need permission to judge. Next was the pharmacist. Daniel Green looked nervous when we walked into the pharmacy. "Mrs. Richter," he said quickly. "I didn't realize." "Daniel," I interrupted gently. "Did you tell Lena I was misusing medication?" His face flushed. "No, well, I told her you only buy vitamins and aspirin. She said that meant you weren't managing your health properly. And the statement you signed," he swallowed. "She said it was for insurance." "I didn't think." Mr. Weber placed a form on the counter. "Then you'll have no problem signing a correction." Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'm so sorry," he said to me. "I didn't know they were trying to do this." Neither did I. Not until it was almost too late. That night, Lena texted me from a new number. "Lena, you're really going to let this go to court?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Me, you already did." No reply. 2 days later, social services came again. Different worker, same questions. This time, Mr. Weber was present. The tone changed immediately. I wasn't a confused widow anymore. I was a client with representation. And suddenly, I was treated like a person. Funny how that works. By the end of the week, Mr. Weber leaned back in his chair and smiled. "They're nervous. How can you tell? They're pushing too hard." When concern turns into control, judges notice. I nodded, "But it still scares me." He didn't sugarcoat it. "It should. This is serious," but they overplayed their hand. That night, I sat on my porch watching the streetlights flicker on. I thought about Max, where he was, what he was telling himself to sleep at night. Did he really believe I was losing my mind, or did he just need that to be true? I whispered into the quiet. "You don't get to bury me alive just to steal my money." And for the first time since this started, I believed I was going to win. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop circling one question: how far would my own son go for money? By morning, I had my answer. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee. I sat on the hard wooden bench beside Mr. Weber, hands folded back straight. Across the room, Max and Lena sat with their lawyer. Lena wore black, not mourning black. Strategic black, the kind people wear when they want to look serious, fragile, believable. Max wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than her stare ever could. The judge entered. "Let's proceed." And suddenly my life became a case file. Lena went first. She stood, her voice trembling right on cue. "Your Honor, this is incredibly painful. I love my mother-in-law. She's like a second mom to me." I almost laughed. "Almost. She's changed," Lena continued. "She's isolated herself. She's paranoid. She cut us off financially without warning. We're just worried." The judge nodded slowly, then looked at me. I met his eyes calmly. Cross-examination began. Mr. Weber stood. "Mrs. Schuster," he said evenly, "when was the last time you visited my client without asking for money?" Lena blinked. "Well, family visits aren't transactional." "Date," Mr. Weber pressed. She swallowed. "I don't recall. How often did you receive money from her?" "Well, she offered." "Amounts." Silence. Mr. Weber placed a document on the stand. "Is this your bank statement?" Lena's face drained of color. "Yes." "Does it show $33,400 transferred over 3 years?" She nodded faintly. "And yet," Mr. Weber continued calmly, "you didn't consider her special enough to attend your wedding." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Max was next. He tried a different approach. "I love my mom," he said, "but she's not herself lately. She's being influenced." "By whom?" the judge asked. Max hesitated. "Neighbors, friends, lawyers." The judge raised an eyebrow. "So everyone except you?" Max didn't answer. Then came the pharmacist's corrected statement. Then Dr. Moore's independent evaluation. Then Alina and my friends, calm, clear, consistent, no hysteria, no confusion, just truth. Finally, it was my turn. I stood, my knees were steady. "My son says I changed," I said softly. "He's right." I looked directly at Max. I stopped paying for love. The judge's pen paused. I raised my son alone after my husband died. I helped because I wanted to, not because I owed. I took a breath. But the day I wasn't invited to his wedding, I understood. I turned back to the court. They didn't lose a mother. I let the silence stretch. They lost a credit line. The room went still, heavy, final. The judge took a breath. This court finds no evidence of incompetence. Lena's head snapped up. This petition is denied. Max slumped. And the judge continued, I caution the petitioners, using mental health laws for financial control constitutes abuse. The gavel struck. Done outside the courthouse, Max finally spoke. You didn't have to do this. I looked at him. You did it first, and I walked away. That night, I slept like someone who had buried fear, not family, fear. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a dull, final thud. That sound didn't mean victory. It meant freedom. Outside, the sun was bright in that sharp way that makes everything feel more real. I paused on the steps and breathed in deeply, not the shallow breath you take while waiting for the next problem, but a steady one, the kind that reminds you you're still here. Behind me, raised voices echoed. Lena, fast, sharp, angry Max. Lower, defensive, cracking, they were arguing with their lawyer about me, about money, about how unfair the judge had been. Not once did I hear concern, only frustration, only loss, only rage. That told me everything. That night, Alina insisted I come over. No way you're sitting alone after today, she said, already pulling plates from the cupboard like she lived there. Her kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, simple, warm, safe. We sat at her table, two women in our 70s who had learned lessons most people never want to face. You okay? She asked gently. I nodded. I'm not sad, I said slowly. I'm clear, she smiled. That's the dangerous stage. We both laughed, but she was right. Clarity changes people, and the ones who benefited from your confusion, they hate it. I was wrong about one thing. I thought the court decision would end it. It didn't. It triggered them. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another. Voicemail after voicemail. I finally listened to one. It was Max. His voice sounded different, not angry, not pleading, calculated. Mom, he said slowly, we don't want things to get ugly, but you're forcing our hand. I stared at the phone. Forcing our hand, I repeated aloud, like I was the threat, like I was the one who tried to take control. Like I was the one who stole. That afternoon, Mr. Weber called. They've retained a new attorney, he said, a very aggressive one. I exhaled. Let me guess, I said. They're claiming emotional abandonment? Worse, he replied. They're going after public pressure. The first post appeared that evening. A long Facebook message from Lena. No names, just implication. I never thought I'd see the day when family turns their back on you, when money matters more than love, when elders forget who stood by them. The comments poured in. You don't deserve that. Some people change when they get old. So sad to see greed ruin families. I didn't have Facebook. But Alina did. She showed me. My hands didn't shake. My stomach didn't drop. I felt amused. Because for the first time, I recognized manipulation for what it was. They're trying to shame you into folding, Alina said. They'll keep pushing, I replied, because that's all they know. 2 days later, it got worse. I went to the grocery store, the same one I'd shopped at for years. The cashier looked at me differently, too careful, too polite. You doing okay, Mrs. Richter? She asked. I paused. Yes, I said. Why? She hesitated. Oh, no reason. That's when I knew. They weren't just posting, they were talking. Mr. Weber confirmed it the next morning. They've been calling extended family, he said, painting a picture of neglect. Emotional cruelty. Anyone believing them? I asked. Some, he admitted, but the ones who matter, they're asking questions. Good, let them. That weekend, I hosted dinner, not for family, for witnesses, Alina, Cynthia from the salon. Maria, Alfreda, 4 women who had watched me reclaim my life in real time. We laughed, we ate, we talked about books, travel, and garden disasters. No money, no guilt, no eggshells. At one point, Alfreda raised her glass. To Renate, she said, for choosing peace over permission. I blinked back tears. Monday morning brought another escalation, a certified letter from Max and Lena's lawyer. They were threatening to sue for financial reliance damages. I laughed, actually laughed. Let them try, Mr. Weber said calmly. They'll have to admit in court they were financially dependent on you. There was silence on the line. Then I surprised myself. Good, I said. That afternoon I did something symbolic. I went to the bank, closed the account they knew, opened a new one, different branch, different city. I signed the paperwork slowly, not angrily, not dramatically, like someone closing a chapter. That night I sat on my porch. The sky was soft blue, the air warm, and for the first time in years my phone was quiet, no emergencies. No guilt, no manipulation, just space. I realized then they weren't angry because I said no. They were angry because I finally meant it. And that's when the real retaliation began, but I was ready. Because when people lose access to your money, they show you exactly who they are, and I was done pretending not to see it. If you think people calm down when you stop giving them money, let me tell you something straight, that's when the real show starts. Because when entitlement loses access, it doesn't walk away quietly, it screams. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday morning. I was watering my front plants when a car slowed in front of my house. Not stopped, just slow enough to stare. It was Lena. I didn't wave, I didn't flinch, I kept watering. She rolled past, tires crunching the gravel like punctuation. Message delivered. By Friday, the rumors had legs. I heard them at the pharmacy, at the bakery, at church. She's not the same anymore. She's being controlled. It's sad when money changes people. Funny thing was, the people saying that had never once asked how I was doing. They only noticed me once I stopped paying. Eleanor noticed my quiet. You okay? She asked. I'm observing, I said. Observing what? How far they'll go. That weekend, my sister Diana flew in from Chicago. She hugged me tight the moment she saw me. They called me, she said quietly. Max, I asked, and Lena, I sighed. What did they say? That you're spiraling, that you've cut everyone off, that strangers are influencing you. Diana looked me straight in the eye. And I told them they were full of it. I laughed, the first real laugh all day. Over dinner, she told me everything. They asked me to talk to you, convince you to be reasonable again. I snorted. That word, they even hinted, she added, lowering her voice, that if you don't come around, they'll have no choice but to protect themselves financially. I set my fork down, meaning, they want you scared. I nodded. Too late, the next escalation came by mail, another letter, different lawyer, different tone, colder. They were demanding reimbursement for shared household expenses. Mr. Weber read it once, then smiled. They're panicking, but the ugliest move came next, and it hurt, bad. I got a call from my church coordinator. Renate, she said gently, there's been concern raised. My chest tightened. About what? About whether you're well enough to continue volunteering. I closed my eyes. Lena volunteered there too. Of course she did. They said you've been unpredictable. I opened my eyes slowly. I'll step back, I said calmly. Not because I agreed, but because I refused to fight in every arena. Some battles aren't worth your peace. That night I sat alone, no Alina, no guests, just me. And for the first time since all this began, I cried, not for Max. Not for Lena, but for myself, for the years I spent shrinking just to stay useful, for the silence I accepted as normal, for the way I confused tolerance with love. But grief doesn't weaken you, it clears you out. The next morning I woke up different, not angry, resolved. I called Mr. Weber. I want to change my will, I said. He didn't hesitate. Good timing. We spent hours rewriting everything, trusts, beneficiaries, charities, protections. Clauses. By the end, Max and Lena appeared exactly once, as excluded parties, not out of revenge, out of clarity. When I signed the final page, my hand didn't shake. That surprised me. 2 days later, Max showed up, no warning. I watched him through the camera, standing there, hands in his pockets, looking smaller. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. What do you want, Max? His voice cracked. Mom, please. I waited. I just want to talk. We've talked, I said. No, he replied quietly. You talked. I didn't listen. Silence stretched. I'm listening now. I closed my eyes and said the hardest thing I've ever said. It's too late for listening, he inhaled sharply. So that's it, you're just done? No, I said calmly. I'm done paying for disrespect. He stood there a long moment. Then you've changed. I smiled sadly. No. I stopped pretending. He left without another word. That night, Alina brought wine. To boundaries, she said. To peace, I replied. A week later, the posts stopped. The calls stopped. The threats stopped, not because they understood, but because they ran out of leverage. And that's when I realized something important. They never wanted reconciliation. They wanted access. And once access was gone, so were they. That evening, I sat in my garden and watched the sun sink low. I wasn't lonely, I was free. And freedom is quiet. The silence that followed wasn't sudden. It crept in, slow, respectful, like it was asking permission. And for the first time in my life, I let it stay. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no letters, no posts, no drive-bys, nothing. And that's when the truth settled in. They weren't healing. They were regrouping. People like Max and Lena don't disappear. They wait. The confirmation came in an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed cold. Final, they were withdrawing all contact, effective immediately, unless I came to my senses. I folded the letter slowly, not shaking, not angry, just finished. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. I didn't cry. I didn't panic, I didn't chase. I asked myself one question: if I had no money, would they still want me? The answer came instantly. No hesitation, no doubt, and with that answer came peace. Alina came by the next morning. She didn't ask questions, she just hugged me, long, solid, like family should. You okay? She asked softly. I'm grieving, I said, but not what I thought. I wasn't grieving my son. I was grieving the fantasy of who I believed he was. The version I protected, excused, financed, the version that existed only in my hope. I started clearing things out, old paperwork, receipts, folders labeled Max. I didn't burn them, I shredded them, clean, methodical. Each page felt like releasing a lie, then I did something unexpected. I booked a trip, just me, no itinerary for anyone else, no emergency contacts, no guilt. I stood in front of the mirror that morning and smiled. Not because I was brave, but because I was done being small. At the airport, I watched families rush around, mothers paying, fixing, managing. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Some people never stopped paying, I had. Mid-trip, my phone buzzed, a message, unknown number, Mom, it's Max. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed 3 words, I'm at peace, and blocked the number. That night, I slept like someone who had closed a door on purpose. When I returned home, something had changed. The house felt bigger, lighter, mine. I painted the guest room, donated old furniture, opened windows I'd kept closed for years. I was making space, not for them, for me. Weeks later, Alina asked something that surprised me. Do you miss him? I thought carefully. I miss who I thought he was, I said, but not who he chose to be. That's when I realized something important. You don't lose people. You lose access, and sometimes losing access saves your life. I started volunteering again, not where Lena could watch, somewhere new. I met people who didn't know my past, who didn't care about my bank account, who asked about me. One afternoon, a woman said, You have such calm energy. I smiled. Practice, I replied. I don't know what Max tells people now. I don't care, because I finally learned the truth. Love that costs you your dignity is not love, it's rent. And I paid it for years. Now I live debt-free, emotionally, spiritually, financially. And if you're listening to this thinking, maybe I should have said no sooner, let me tell you something gently, it's never too late. The door to peace opens the moment you stop begging to be valued. People think the hard part is saying no. It's not. The hard part is learning how to live after you stop explaining yourself. The first week after I blocked Max for good, I kept reaching for my phone out of habit. Not because I wanted to call him, but because for years my entire routine revolved around anticipation. Waiting for a problem, waiting for a bill, waiting for a crisis that needed my money, my energy, my guilt. Now there was nothing. And that kind of quiet can feel terrifying until you realize it's peace. One morning, I noticed something strange. My shoulders didn't hurt. I hadn't carried that tension in years. It was like my body finally understood what my heart already knew. The emergency was over. I made breakfast slowly. No rushing, no mental math about how much money I'd need to transfer later. No rehearsing conversations in my head, just eggs, toast, sunlight. I sat at the table and laughed out loud. It felt illegal to be this calm. That afternoon, Alina knocked on my door with a grin. You busy? She asked. For once, I smiled. Nope, good, she said. I signed us up for a beginner's art class. I blinked. Art, painting, she said. You mentioned you used to love it. Used to, that phrase hit me hard. I had lived in the past tense for years. The class was full of strangers. No one knew my story. No one saw me as a wallet, just another woman with paint on her hands and nerves in her chest. The instructor said, There's no wrong way to paint here. I almost cried. When I dipped my brush into blue, something unlocked, not sadness, not anger, relief. I painted without thinking, without apologizing, without checking the time. For the first time in years, I lost myself in something that didn't involve saving someone else. After class, a woman named Carol leaned over and said, You've got a steady hand. Years of practice holding everything together, I replied. She laughed, but I meant it. Over the next few weeks, my days filled up, not with obligations, with choices, coffee dates, walks, classes, silence when I wanted it, and slowly I stopped feeling guilty about being happy. That's when the rumors started, because peace bothers people who benefited from your chaos. Alina told me first. I ran into someone from Max's circle, she said carefully. I raised an eyebrow. And they're saying you've changed. I smiled. Good. Apparently Max was telling people I'd been brainwashed, that I was unstable, that I'd abandoned my family. Funny how boundaries look like betrayal to people who never respected you. But here's what they didn't expect. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct the story. I didn't show up to explain. Because I finally understood something powerful. You don't owe clarity to people who thrived in your confusion. One evening, my sister Diana called. Renate, she said, I heard something wild. I sighed. Let me guess, I'm senile, bitter, and hoarding money. She laughed. Yep, that's the version. And, I asked. And I told them you look happier than you have in 20 years. That night, I slept better than I had in a long time. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, handwritten from Max, not a text, not an email, paper, ink. Desperation has a way of slowing people down. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter for 2 days, because for the first time, I was in control of when something entered my life. When I finally opened it, my hands didn't shake. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was regret wrapped in excuses. He wrote about stress, about pressure, about how things got out of hand, not one sentence about my feelings. Not one acknowledgement of the lawsuit, just a soft request. He missed how things used to be. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. No response. Not yet. Some conversations don't deserve an answer. They deserve distance. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding. I joined a local volunteer group, nothing flashy, helping seniors with paperwork, teaching them how to spot financial manipulation. Funny how experience turns into purpose. One woman grabbed my hand after a meeting and said, "I wish I'd learned this sooner." I squeezed back. So did I. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was useful, not because of my money, because of my wisdom, and somewhere deep down I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the calm before the consequence. Because when people lose access to your wallet, they try to regain access to your life. Silence scares people who are used to control, and my silence, it drove Max absolutely insane. 3 days after the letter, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. I didn't answer, then another call, then another, different numbers. Same desperation. People like Max always assume blocking is temporary. They believe you'll cave. On the fourth day, Alina called me. "Renate," she said carefully, "Max was here." My stomach tightened. "At your place?" I asked. "No," she replied, "at the community center." That hit harder. That space was mine now, my safe place. "He was asking questions," she continued. "About you, about your money, about who you're spending time with." I closed my eyes. Of course he was. When people lose direct access, they start fishing through your world. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "The truth," she said firmly, "that you're healthy, sharp, and happier than I've ever seen you." Good. Because lies collapse when enough people know the truth. That evening, I sat on my balcony and watched the sun sink behind the buildings. I felt it, that shift in the air, the calm before the storm. Then my phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. From Max. I shouldn't have listened, but curiosity is human. "Mom," his voice cracked, "I don't understand why you're doing this. People are talking, they think I'm some kind of monster." I laughed, not because it was funny. Because it was familiar. He wasn't worried about me, he was worried about his image. The message ended with a warning disguised as concern. "I just don't want things to get complicated." That word again, complicated. It never means peace, it means threat. The next morning, I learned exactly what he meant. A letter arrived, official, stamped, from family court. My hands didn't shake, they burned. Max had filed a motion requesting a temporary financial oversight review. Not full guardianship. Not yet, just enough to pry the door open, just enough to scare me. They always underestimate women who have already survived worse. I called Mr. Weber immediately. He didn't sound surprised. "I expected this," he said calmly. "This is the pressure phase." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they're testing you," he replied. "They want to see if you'll panic, if you'll negotiate, if you'll give them something. And if I don't, then they escalate." Good, let them, because here's what Max didn't know. I had documented everything. Texts, calls, voicemails, witnesses, every attempt to intimidate. Every lie, every manipulation. Mr. Weber smiled when I handed him the folder. "This," he said, tapping it, "isn't a case against you. It's a case against them." Meanwhile, Max wasn't finished. He changed tactics. He showed up at my old church, sat in the front row, cried afterward, told people he was losing his mother, that I'd been turned against him. A woman from the congregation called me later. "Renate," she said gently, "Max seems really worried." I took a slow breath. "I know," I replied. "He's worried he can't control me anymore." She paused, then said quietly, honestly, "I'm proud of you." That support hit deeper than she realized. That night, Alina came over with takeout and wine. "Whatever happens," she said, raising her glass, "you didn't imagine this. And you didn't cause it." I clinked my glass against hers. "To clarity," I said. 2 days later, the real bomb dropped. Max filed a formal petition, full guardianship, mental incompetence, complete financial control. That was it. No pretending this was concern, no dressing it up as love. This was war. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't collapse. I called Mr. Weber and said 4 words, "Let's finish this." He scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. Not because I needed one, but because they would regret asking for it. When I hung up, I looked around my apartment. the paintings, the plants, the light, the life, and I smiled because the truth has a funny way of winning, quietly, relentlessly. They thought cutting me off would make me crawl back. Instead, they handed me the chance to stand in front of a judge and say, I am not broken, I am not confused, I am done being used, and in Part 4C, everything explodes. Courtroom truth, public reckoning, they wanted control, they're about to lose everything. Courtrooms have a smell, old paper, cold coffee, fear pretending to be confidence. I noticed it the second I walked in. Max was already there, so was Lena. They didn't sit together, that told me everything. Max wore a navy suit like he was trying to look responsible. Lena wore black again, still playing the grieving daughter-in-law, still acting like I was already gone. When Max saw me walk in, his face changed, just for a second. Shock not because I looked weak, but because I didn't. I stood tall, back straight, eyes clear, no trembling hands, no confusion, just a woman who finally understood her worth. Judge Miller entered. Everyone stood. He looked tired. But sharp, the kind of man who had seen 100 fake tears and didn't buy a single one. This is the case of Richter versus Richter, he said. Hearing my own name used like that, it stung, but I didn't flinch. Max's lawyer went first. He stood, adjusted his tie, and spoke in a voice dripping with concern. Your Honor, he began, we are deeply worried about Mrs. Renate Richter's mental health. There it was, the lie dressed up as love. He talked about my sudden personality change, my paranoia, my withdrawal from family, every word carefully chosen, every sentence meant to make me sound fragile. Then Lena took the stand. She cried, softly, perfectly. The kind of crying that looks real until you've lived with manipulation. She used to be so generous, Lena said, so loving, now she's cold, she won't even answer our calls. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Because this wasn't about feelings, it was about evidence. Then Max testified, watching your own child lie about your sanity, that cuts deeper than betrayal. She forgets things, he said. She's angry all the time. She listens to strangers instead of her family. I locked eyes with him. He looked away, because liars can't hold the gaze of truth. Then it was our turn. Mr. Weber stood, calm, precise, unshakable. Your Honor, he said, what we are witnessing today is not concern. It is retaliation. He submitted the documents, every transfer, every payment, every receipt. $33,400, he said clearly. Transferred over 3 years by a 71-year-old woman to support 2 able-bodied adults. The room went silent. Then Dr. Moore took the stand. She didn't hesitate. Mrs. Richter is mentally sound, she said. Her cognitive function is above average for her age. She paused. In my professional opinion, she is experiencing psychological pressure, not cognitive decline. Judge Miller leaned forward. That was the moment. Alina testified next, then Cynthia, then Maria, strong women, clear voices, consistent truth. She's happier now, Alina said. She's calmer, she's not confused, she's finally free. Then Mr. Weber turned to me. Mrs. Richter, he said gently, would you like to speak? I stood. My knees didn't shake, my voice didn't break. Yes, I said. I raised my son alone after my husband died, I began. I worked, I saved, I gave, I swallowed. I gave money, time, love. I looked at Max. And the day I was told I wasn't special enough to attend my own son's wedding, something inside me broke. The judge watched closely. I didn't lose my mind, I continued. I found it, gasps, whispers, silence. I stopped paying because I realized love should not come with invoices. I paused, and anyone who tries to take my freedom by calling me incompetent proves exactly why I had to stop. Judge Miller leaned back. A long pause, then this court finds no evidence of mental incompetence. My heart lifted. The petition for guardianship is denied. Lena's face collapsed. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court finds the petitioner's actions concerning. Max froze. Any further attempts to control Mrs. Richter's finances may be considered harassment. Gavel, bang, it was over. Max didn't look at me. Lena stormed out. I didn't chase them, didn't explain, didn't apologize. I walked out with my head high. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. Alina hugged me. You won, she said. No, I replied softly. I survived, and for the first time in years, that was enough. Winning doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels quiet, almost awkward, like standing in a room after a storm, unsure what's still broken and what survived. The first thing I noticed after the courtroom, my phone stayed silent, no calls. No texts, no fake concern, just nothing. That silence used to terrify me. Now it felt like oxygen. For weeks, I woke up expecting chaos, a knock at the door, a lawyer's letter, another attempt to control me, but none came. Because bullies don't know what to do when they lose publicly, I went back to my routines. Morning coffee on the balcony, the newspaper, a crossword, simple things, things I used to rush through because someone always needed something. Alina noticed the change first. You're lighter, she said one afternoon, like someone finally took off a backpack full of bricks. She wasn't wrong, but freedom has side effects and nobody warns you about them. I'd catch myself thinking. Should I call Max? Should I explain? Should I soften this? Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. Then I remembered the courtroom, the lies, the lawsuit, the way they tried to erase me legally, and the guilt vanished. 3 weeks later, I received an envelope, no return address. My stomach tightened. Inside was a letter from Max. It wasn't long, just enough words to feel rehearsed. Mom, I don't understand how things got this far. We were just trying to protect you. This didn't have to be public. I hope someday you come to your senses. No apology, no accountability, just blame wrapped in disappointment. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and locked it. Some doors don't deserve reopening. Meanwhile, life kept moving. A better life. I sold my house, not out of fear, out of choice. Too many memories tied to sacrifice. I wanted new walls, new air, new energy. The apartment I chose had sunlight in every room, a balcony big enough for plants, neighbors who waved without expecting anything. On moving day, Alina helped me unpack. She laughed when she saw my art supplies. You're finally buying things for you, she said. About damn time. That night, alone in my new space, I sat on the floor with a glass of wine. No noise, no obligation, no fear. I cried, but not from pain, from relief. 2 months later, the phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Renate, Lena's voice said sharply. We need to talk, I smiled. No, I replied calmly. You need to learn. And I hung up. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't bitter. I was done. Funny thing about people who live off someone else's wallet, they don't plan for the day it closes. 2 months after the court ruling, the calls stopped. Not because they'd healed, because they were scrambling. I found out the way I always did. Through someone else, Cynthia called me one afternoon. You didn't hear this from me, she said, lowering her voice, but Lena was at the salon today. I raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Applying, Cynthia replied. For a job, that alone said everything. Lena had never worked a real job, not really. She always said she was between opportunities. Turns out opportunity dries up fast when the ATM fights back. Max didn't fare much better. Alina's nephew worked in property management. Guess whose rent was overdue? Your son's apartment, he told Alina casually. 3 months behind, eviction notice already sent. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just nodded. Because consequences aren't revenge, they're math. A week later, I ran into Max, not on purpose, at the grocery store. He looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. Same jacket, same posture, different energy. He froze when he saw me. Like a kid caught cheating. Mom, he said quietly. I nodded. Max. We stood there between the cereal aisle and frozen foods, two strangers sharing DNA. How have you been? He asked. The question sounded empty. Like he was reading from a script. Peaceful, I replied. That seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. We're having a hard time, he said finally. Things didn't work out like we planned. There it was. We planned, not we failed. Not we hurt you, just poor planning. I'm sorry to hear that, I said calmly, and I meant it, but sympathy doesn't mean rescue. He shifted his weight. We could really use some help right now. Of course, I looked him straight in the eyes. No, one word, no dramas, no explanation. His jaw tightened. You've really changed, he said. No, I replied softly. I finally stopped pretending. He walked away, didn't look back. Later that week, Alina knocked on my door. Are you ready for this? She asked. For what? She handed me a printed post from social media. Lena had written a long, dramatic message about toxic parents, about financial abandonment, about choosing peace. She never named me. She didn't have to. The comments were mixed. Some people bought it, others didn't. One comment stood out. Funny how you talk about abandonment now. Didn't you abandon your mother first? Truth has a way of slipping through cracks. That night, I slept better than I had in years because I understood something important. They were finally facing life without a safety net, and instead of destroying them, it was teaching them. I didn't win by taking from them. I won by refusing to be taken from anymore. Closure doesn't arrive with an apology. It arrives the day you stop waiting for one. 3 months passed. No calls, no letters, no emergencies, no drama, just space. At first, the silence felt heavy, like a missing limb. Then it became comfortable, like finally stretching after years of being cramped. I filled my days with things that didn't ask anything of me. Morning walks, painting again. Long lunches with Alina and the girls. I laughed more, slept deeper. Breathed easier. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, I found something unexpected. A photo, Max at 5 years old, missing teeth, dirty knees, his arm wrapped around my leg like I was the whole world. I sat with that photo for a long time. I didn't cry. I smiled because that boy was real and loving him was never a mistake. What was a mistake was believing love meant self erasure. I placed the photo back in the box, not out of anger. Out of peace, a week later, I received another message, this time from a mutual acquaintance. Just so you know, she wrote, Max and Lena moved to a smaller place. They're both working now. Things are different. Good. Different is how growth begins. Did I feel satisfaction? A little, I'm human, but mostly, I felt relief because they were finally standing on their own, the way adults should. That evening, Alina and I sat on my balcony watching the city lights come on. You ever regret it? She asked. What? Choosing yourself. I shook my head. Not once, she smiled. That's how I knew you'd be okay. I took a sip of wine and thought about all the years I'd spent apologizing for existing, for needing rest, for wanting more. Never again. I didn't lose my son. I lost an illusion, and what I gained. Self-respect, freedom, peace. Some people come into your life to be loved forever. Others come to teach you when to walk away. Both lessons matter. So if you're listening to this story and feeling guilty for setting boundaries, let me tell you something. Love doesn't demand silence. Love doesn't drain your savings. Love doesn't threaten your sanity. Love respects, and the moment you choose yourself, that's not selfish, that's survival. If this story spoke to you, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And remember, it's never too late to stop paying for love and start living for yourself. People think the story ends when you win in court. It doesn't. That's just where the noise stops, and real life begins. 6 months after everything blew up, my days looked nothing like they used to. No panic mornings. No guilt-filled budgeting, no waiting for my phone to ring. I woke up when I wanted, ate what I wanted, went where I wanted, and for the first time in decades, no one depended on my wallet to survive. I signed up for a watercolor class at the Community Arts Center. On the first day, I almost didn't go. Old habits die hard. That familiar voice whispered, "You don't belong here. This is selfish. You should be doing something useful." I ignored it. Best decision I made all year. The room smelled like paper and paint. Sunlight spilled across long tables. People my age, people younger, people who looked happy just being there. The instructor smiled at me. First time, she asked. First time choosing myself, I replied. She laughed. I liked that answer. I painted flowers badly and didn't care. After class, a woman named Carol invited me for coffee. We talked about books, travel, childhood dreams. Not once did she ask about my son. Not once did she ask for anything. That's when it hit me. Healthy relationships don't feel heavy. Weeks passed. I redecorated my apartment. Bright colors, plants everywhere. Photos that made me smile. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. It was Diana, my sister. Renate, she said softly. I ran into Max. My chest tightened. Where? I asked. At a job fair, she replied. He didn't look great. I didn't interrupt. He asked about you, she continued. Said he hopes you're okay. I smiled sadly. Did he ask to talk to me? I asked. No, Diana said. He said you probably wouldn't want to hear from him. At least he was finally right about something. That night, I sat on my balcony watching traffic flow like a river, people moving forward, some stuck, some free. I whispered into the night, I'm okay. And for the first time, I meant it, but life wasn't done surprising me yet. 2 weeks later, I received a letter, handwritten, careful, from Lena. My hands didn't shake, they didn't burn. They felt steady. The letter was short, no drama, no accusations, just this. Renate, I don't expect forgiveness, but I finally understand what you meant. We lost more than money. We lost you, and that's on us. I read it twice. Then folded it. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because some realizations don't need replies. People assume forgiveness means reopening doors. It doesn't. Sometimes forgiveness just means you stop carrying the weight. I kept Lena's letter in a drawer, not as proof, not as leverage, as closure. For the first time, she hadn't asked for money, hadn't blamed me, hadn't played the victim. She simply admitted the truth, and that mattered. But growth doesn't come with guarantees. Understanding doesn't erase damage. And awareness doesn't undo betrayal. Weeks passed, then months. Life stayed steady, comfortable. Mine, I traveled, nothing extravagant, just small trips, train rides, new streets, new coffee shops, places where no one knew my past. In one small town, I met a woman my age sitting alone on a bench. We talked for hours, about regret, about starting over, about learning late. Before we parted, she said something that stayed with me. You don't get a medal for suffering longer than necessary. I laughed. She was right. Back home, I received a call from Mr. Weber. Just updating you, he said. Max and Lena withdrew their appeal. I closed my eyes. Relief moved through me slowly, deeply. So it's done? I asked. It's done, he confirmed. No more threats, no more courtrooms, no more shadows. That night, Alina came over with champagne. To your freedom, she said. I raised my glass. To peace, I replied. Later, as we sat quietly, she asked, do you think Max will ever change? I thought for a long moment. I think hardship will teach him what love couldn't, I said. And Lena, she asked. She already learned, I replied, just too late for access. One evening, I opened my old email account, something I hadn't done in months. There was a message from Max, short, simple. Mom, I hope you're happy. I really do. That was it. No request, no guilt, no manipulation, just acceptance. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed one sentence. I am, and hit send. That was the last message we ever exchanged. And strangely, it felt right. Not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with resolution, and that's enough. I started volunteering more, helping seniors recognize financial abuse. Teaching them how to say no without apology. One man cried during a session. I thought I was the only one, he said. I squeezed his hand. You're not. And that's when I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a warning. A lesson, a lifeline. There's a moment that comes after the dust settles. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. A year passed, then another. Life didn't explode into miracles. It softened, and that was better. My mornings were slow now, coffee on the balcony. Plants I actually kept alive. Paintings that weren't perfect but were mine. I stopped explaining my past. People met me where I was, not where I had been useful. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork, I updated my will. Not because I was afraid, because I was clear. I left donations to organizations that protect seniors from financial abuse. I left gifts to friends who showed up when money didn't. And for Max, I left something small, a letter. It wasn't angry, it wasn't cold. It said this: I loved you fiercely. I just loved myself too late. Don't repeat my mistake. I sealed it and felt no guilt. That night, Alina and I sat watching the sunset. You ever feel lonely? She asked. I shook my head. No, I said, I feel complete. Because loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about being unseen. And for the first time in my life, I was fully seen by myself. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who paid for love, who stayed quiet to keep peace, who believed sacrifice was the same thing as devotion. She did her best, but she wasn't free. Now, I choose joy without apology. Boundaries without guilt, love without invoices. Some people lose family and gain wisdom. Some lose money and gain independence. I lost illusions and I gained my life. If you're listening to this story and wondering, is it too late for me? Let me tell you something. As long as you're breathing, it's not too late to stop being used, not too late to say no, not too late to choose yourself. Because freedom doesn't ask permission, and dignity doesn't expire. Thank you for listening to my story, and if it touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done? The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt honest, no tension in the air, no waiting for the phone to ring, no bracing myself before opening my bank app, just quiet, the good kind. For weeks after the court decision, I kept expecting something dramatic to happen. A breakdown, a wave of regret, some grand emotional crash, but it never came. What came instead was clarity. I realized something strange. The chaos in my life had never come from being alone. It came from being constantly needed. Needed for money, needed for rescue, needed to clean up messes that were never mine. When that stopped, so did the noise. I started noticing small things again. The way sunlight hit the kitchen table at 9 in the morning. The soft sound of my neighbor's wind chimes. The fact that I could leave my phone in another room and not feel panic. For the first time in decades, my nervous system finally relaxed. People think freedom feels exciting, like fireworks, but real freedom, it feels quiet. One afternoon, I found an old photo album, Max at 6 years old. Gap-toothed smile, holding my hand like I was the center of the universe. I sat there for a long time, not crying, just remembering. I didn't hate him, that surprised me. I hated the entitlement. I hated the manipulation. I hated what he allowed his wife to turn me into. But him, no, what hurt wasn't losing my son. It was realizing I had already lost him years ago and kept paying to pretend I hadn't. I thought about all the moments I ignored my instincts. Every time my stomach tightened before sending money. Every time I felt dismissed but smiled anyway. Every time I told myself, this is what good mothers do. No one tells you this. You can love your child and still be used by them. I started writing again. Not letters, lists, things I would never do again. Never fund disrespect, never confuse guilt with love, never negotiate my dignity, never beg for inclusion. That list became my backbone. People noticed the change, the grocery clerk who said, you look lighter, the neighbor who said, you walk different now. They were right, I wasn't carrying anyone anymore. One evening, Alina asked me something that stopped me cold. If Max showed up tomorrow, crying and apologizing, what would you do? I didn't answer right away, because this time I didn't want to lie. I would listen, I said finally, but I wouldn't open my wallet. And I wouldn't open my home, she smiled. That's how I know you're healed, because healing isn't about revenge, it's about boundaries that don't shake. That night I slept deeply, not the exhausted sleep of survival. The steady sleep of someone who finally trusts herself. And somewhere in that stillness, I understood the truth that changed everything. I didn't lose my family. I outgrew the version of myself that let them hurt me. Something unexpected happened once the dust settled. People started treating me differently, not because they knew my story, not because I explained anything, but because I stopped explaining myself altogether. I noticed it at the bank first. The teller didn't rush me, she didn't talk over me, she waited. And I realized something important. I had trained people how to treat me for years, by apologizing when I didn't need to. By overgiving, by shrinking, I stopped doing that. I enrolled in a community art class, nothing fancy, just a room full of adults who showed up for themselves. No one asked me what I did for my kids. No one asked how much money I had. No one needed rescuing. They just asked, "What do you like to paint?" I didn't know how to answer at first. That scared me. So much of my identity had been wrapped around usefulness. Being needed, being reliable, being the backup plan. Without that, I felt exposed. But slowly I remembered. I liked blues and greens. I liked landscapes more than faces. I liked silence while I worked. I liked being uninterrupted. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found the wedding gift envelope, still sealed, the $1,000 I had saved. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, with clarity. That money was never meant to buy love. It was meant to celebrate a relationship that didn't exist. I took the envelope to the bank and deposited it into my travel fund. Then I booked a small trip, nothing extravagant. Just a place by the water. I didn't tell anyone, not because it was a secret, but because it didn't need an audience. The trip changed something in me, not because of the location, but because of how I moved through it. I didn't rush. I didn't compromise. I didn't adjust my plans for anyone else. If I wanted coffee at noon, I had coffee at noon. If I wanted silence, I took it. I realized how often women, especially mothers, are taught that joy must be earned. That rest is a reward, that peace comes last. I stopped believing that. Back home, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, a former coworker. She looked surprised. "You seem different," she said. I smiled. "I finally stopped auditioning." She laughed, then nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what I meant. One night, I almost reached for my phone to check Max's social media. Old habit, then I stopped. And asked myself a question I'd never asked before. What am I hoping to feel? Closure, validation, pain, none of those were worth reopening the wound, so I put the phone down. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet decisions you make over and over again, not calling, not explaining, not chasing. I began to understand something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Love doesn't mean unlimited entry. And being someone's mother doesn't mean being their safety net forever. I didn't become cold. I became selective. One evening, Alina and I sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange. She said softly, "You know, some people never wake up." I nodded. "I almost didn't." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did more than wake up," she said. "You chose yourself without becoming bitter." That's when it hit me. I hadn't hardened, I had healed without losing my softness. And that's the part no one warns you about. When you finally choose yourself, you don't become selfish, you become whole. The message came on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic, no apology essay, no crying voicemail, just a text. "Mom, are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood something important. That question wasn't concern, it was inventory. I didn't answer right away. I made tea instead. I sat at the table, watched the steam rise, let myself feel everything without reacting. That was new for me. For years I would have jumped, explained, reassured, overshared, but now I waited. I asked myself one simple question. If I reply, what am I reopening? I knew the pattern. Concern, right arrow, conversation, right arrow, guilt, right arrow, request. It always followed the same script, so I rewrote it. I replied with one sentence. "I'm doing well, I hope you are too." That was it. No invitation, no explanation. No emotional doorway. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. And strangely, I felt peace, not victory, not satisfaction, peace. A week later, I received a letter, handwritten, from Max. The handwriting looked the same as when he was a teenager. That hurt more than I expected. He wrote about stress, about mistakes, about feeling overwhelmed. He didn't apologize directly. He didn't mention the lawsuit. He didn't mention the money, but there was one line that stopped me cold. "I didn't realize how much you did until it was gone." I folded the letter carefully, and placed it in a drawer, not as proof, not as leverage, but as a marker. That sentence wasn't enough, but it was something. I didn't reply, not yet, because reconciliation without accountability is just another trap, and I had learned that lesson the hard way. People think closure comes from conversations. It doesn't, it comes from boundaries you no longer feel guilty about. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, not because I looked younger, but because I looked settled. I wasn't bracing anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't budgeting my joy. I had space, mental space, emotional space, financial space, and in that space, something surprising happened. Compassion returned. Not for what they did, but for what I no longer needed to carry. I realized I could love my son without sacrificing myself. I could wish him well without funding his life. I could forgive without reopening my door. That's the kind of maturity no one teaches you. You learn it when being nice nearly costs you everything. On my birthday, Alina baked a cake, nothing fancy, just chocolate with one candle. She said, "This one's for the year you finally chose yourself." I blew it out and didn't wish for anything because I already had it. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, city lights below, quiet above. And I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who thought love meant endurance, the one who thought sacrifice was proof. She wasn't weak, she just didn't know yet, and now I knew. Some people will only miss you when you stop saving them. Some will call it cruelty, others will call it strength. I call it freedom. People assume the end of a story looks like fireworks. Big apologies, tearful reunions, hugs that fix everything. Real life doesn't work like that. Real life ends quietly. Once the lawsuit was over, once the phone stopped ringing, once the fear finally drained out of my body, I was left with a question no one prepares you for. What do you do when you're no longer surviving? For the first few weeks, I didn't do much, and that was intentional. I slept in, I ate when I was hungry. I stopped explaining myself to anyone. I learned that peace feels unfamiliar when you've lived in crisis mode for too long. One morning, while organizing paperwork, I found my old will, the original one, written years ago. Everything went to max, no conditions, no protections, no second thoughts. I didn't feel angry when I read it. I felt outdated. Like reading a letter written by someone who no longer exists. That woman believed love meant leaving everything behind. This woman believes love means leaving wisdom behind. I called Mr. Weber. "I need to update my will," I said. He didn't ask why, he already knew. We rewrote everything, not out of revenge, out of clarity. I made donations to organizations that protect seniors from financial abuse. I set aside funds for my future care. I left a portion to Max because he is my son, but not in a way that could be rushed, pressured, or exploited. And I added conditions, healthy ones, educational ones, accountability ones. "Are you comfortable with this?" Mr. Weber asked. "I'm finally comfortable with myself," I answered. That night I cooked a real dinner, not something quick, not something cheap, something I enjoyed making. I played music while I cooked. Loud enough to hear, soft enough to feel, and I realized something then. I hadn't truly lived in my own house for years. I had only maintained it for other people. Now, every room felt different, not because anything changed physically, but because nothing was waiting to be taken. Weeks passed, no calls, no messages, no emergencies, and then something unexpected happened. I didn't miss them the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of family. Not the reality I had lived in. There's a difference. One hurts, the other heals. One afternoon, I ran into a woman at the grocery store. She looked exhausted. She apologized 3 times for bumping into me. Then she said something I recognized immediately. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm just dealing with my adult kids. They need me all the time." I smiled gently and said something I wish someone had told me years ago. "Helping isn't love if it destroys you." She stared at me like I'd spoken a forbidden truth. I didn't push. I didn't lecture. I just paid for my groceries and left. Some lessons arrive only when the person is ready. That night, sitting on my balcony, I thought about legacy. Not money, not property, legacy of permission. Permission to say no, permission to rest, permission to choose yourself without apology. I had spent decades modeling sacrifice. Now I wanted to model self-respect, even if no one was watching, and maybe especially because no one was watching. The strangest part of freedom is how ordinary it looks. No applause, no announcements, just mornings that belong to you. I started waking up without a knot in my stomach. No bracing, no checking my phone, just breath. Some days were lonely, I won't lie, but loneliness felt different than neglect. Loneliness is quiet, neglect is loud and constant. I chose quiet. One afternoon, Alina and I sat at a cafe near the park. She stirred her coffee and said, "You know, you don't talk about them much anymore." I nodded. They don't take up space in my head like they used to. That's how you know healing is real. When the people who hurt you stop living rent-free in your mind, I didn't block Max forever. I just stopped chasing him. If he ever wants a relationship built on respect instead of rescue, I'm here. But I won't bend myself again, and that's not cruelty, that's maturity. I learned something important through all of this. Love isn't proven by how much you give. It's proven by how much you're allowed to keep, your voice, your dignity. Your peace, people will call you cold when you stop being convenient. Let them. Cold is still better than being consumed. On my last night in the apartment before a short trip, I packed slowly, not because I was anxious, but because I wasn't running anymore. I stood in front of the mirror, the same wrinkles, the same eyes, but a different posture. I wasn't smaller anymore. I was grounded. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to this story to hear, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because you gave birth to them. Love does not mean surrender. Family does not mean obligation without respect. And boundaries are not punishments, they are protection. If you're in a place where your kindness is being used, where your silence is expected, where your worth is measured by what you provide, please know this. It's not too late to choose yourself. You might lose people, but you will not lose you. And that trade, it's worth it every single time. Thank you for sitting with my story. If it made you think, if it made you feel seen, if it helped you breathe a little easier, then it did its job.